Today, we've got three guests who are going to talk about marketplaces in Singapore, how people from there are actually crushing it in the USA, and also sourcing in Vietnam as opposed to China. Plus, I'll be talking about how to meet me at my upcoming trips to Singapore, Vietnam, Korea, and Japan. How cool is that? Pretty cool, I think. Are you browsing a Shopify, Walmart, Etsy, Alibaba, or Pinterest page and maybe you see a cool product that you want to get some more data on? Well, while you're on those pages, you can actually use the Helium 10 Chrome extension Demand Analyzer to get instant data about what's happening on Amazon for those keywords on these other websites. Or maybe you want to then follow up and get an actual supplier quote from a company on Alibaba.com in order to see if you can get this product produced. You can do that also with the Helium 10 Demand Analyzer. Both of these are part of the Helium 10 Chrome extension, which you can download for free at h10.me/extension. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Serious Sellers Podcast by Helium 10. I am your host, Bradley Sutton, and this is the show that's a completely BS-free, unscripted, and unrehearsed, organic conversation about serious strategies for serious sellers of any level in the e-commerce world. We are going to the other side of the world now for a special episode. We're going to have multiple guests this time. And first, we're going to visit, I believe are you in Singapore right now?
That's right. Nice to meet you, Bradley. Thank you for having me on the show.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for being here, Jordan. Now, were you born and raised there in Singapore?
Yes, 100% born and raised in Singapore.
Now, what's the approximate population? Because some people think, a lot of people, Americans are, we Americans sometimes don't understand the geography of other places. We think, oh, Japan, China, Singapore, Malaysia, it's all the same thing, all about the same size. But Singapore is actually very like, real estate size. It's very small. Land mass size is very small, right?
Yeah, Singapore's just an island state, and we're just a small island off the southern tip of the Malaysian peninsula, the Malay Peninsula.
Hmm.
We have a population of about 5.7 million. Last I
Okay.
read on a few days ago.
Okay. All right. So kind of like, the size of, a larger city, in other countries, but that's the entire country of Singapore. Now, you don't sell on Amazon Singapore, but you buy on Amazon Singapore. Would that be correct, or do you do both?
I used to sell a little bit on Amazon Singapore, but I would say I'm more of a buyer than a seller.
Obviously, you being in Singapore is very convenient. I'm sure you get like same day or next day or something delivery. But can somebody like, those countries that you mentioned, Thailand, Malaysia, other countries, can they go on Amazon Singapore, purchase something, and it's shipped by FBA to Malaysia or to some of these other countries?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I believe they can because I did hear of some of my friends from the neighboring countries buying something from Amazon Singapore.
Okay, interesting, interesting. That's very similar. I just did a podcast recently, Amazon UAE, and yeah, of course, UAE is the principal market, but people from other countries around UAE can actually go to that website and purchase. Same thing for Amazon Germany and things like that. Now, you yourself, your main marketplace is USA. I know you're part of like a coaching program over there in Singapore. What would you say is the percentage of sellers there in Singapore who actually sell mainly in USA or mainly in Europe? Are we talking like 95% of everybody they're all selling in a foreign marketplace, or there are some that are selling in Amazon Singapore?
Again, very good question. And if I can go into a little bit more background, I believe that there are two categories of Amazon sellers in Singapore.
Mhm.
The first category would be those who have existing businesses, and they want to probably put their products onto e-marketplaces like Amazon, Lazada, Shopee, so on and so forth. The second category, what I call the Amazon first entrepreneurs, people who found an opportunity with selling on the Amazon USA and Europe marketplaces, went in, find a product that was suitable, found a niche,
Mhm.
and went in to start selling. So I would say, if I could give a good guess, probably 80-20.
Okay.
So 20% for the first batch and 80% for the second category.
What about you? Like, how long have you been selling on Amazon USA?
I started my Amazon business in July 2020, so that would be slightly over 2 years now. Uh, but I launched in December 2020, so yeah, I would say 1.5 to 2 years, depending on what's the definition of started.
All right. And how's it been going for you?
A lot of ups and downs. It's been a roller coaster ride, really.
Tell me so
Um,
tell me let's start with the down. Tell me what's the some of the worst things that's happened to you.
the worst things would be, I guess, just things going wrong, like the 3PLs not cooperating, asking them to send a shipment into Amazon, and they just totally went silent. I even had a 3PL owner telling me to take my business elsewhere because I just politely asked him, how long would it take? Because if your 3PL can't handle my fulfillment orders into Amazon, I might
Mhm.
have to diversify my risk into a couple more 3PLs, and he took that very personally. But I was just all about business, right? That's one of the worst moments, I believe. Um, Another moment would be when I released a new product which was doing really well. I started having 3-star, 1-star reviews complaining about uh, a certain functionality of the product, and then when I actually at first I didn't believe it, right? I thought that it was like competitors sabotaging my listings and all. But I went to dig a little bit deeper, and I did some investigation. I realized that the investigation, sorry, not investigation, the quality control company that I hired to check the products didn't do their job properly, right? So that's
Okay.
another down for me. And I would
What
say
about the
right now,
positives though?
positives, a lot of
Okay.
positives. I hit 6 figures in my first year, three, I think, about 400,000, and
Awesome.
I'm on track to do about maybe 700,000 by end of this year.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, what about the people in your community? Any cool success stories that I mean, you don't have to say their specific name necessarily or their exact product, but other people who live in Singapore who have had success selling in other countries.
Yeah, I think the best success story I've heard so far, one of the members of our community. And this guy, he did it a little bit different because he was a business owner to begin with, not like a solo entrepreneur, which most of us are, at least here in Singapore. He kind of built a team around his Amazon business, and he scaled to, I think, a run rate of about three to $4,000 a day in terms of sales within less than 1.5 years. So I would say less
Wow.
than 2 years, we're looking at about 1 to 2 million revenue for this guy.
Now, um, I'm going to be talking a little bit about this with a later guest here in this episode, but I'm actually going, Jordan, to Singapore in a few weeks. I was invited by Amazon Singapore to speak at an event there, and so it'd be great to get some Helium 10 members in your community. Let's get together for lunch or let's meet up at that conference. That sounds good.
Yeah, definitely, right? I can easily get at least 20, 30 people at a drop of a ball. Pretty
Oh, that's
easy.
awesome. All right, now completely not related to e-commerce. Whenever I travel, I love doing like touristy things. Top 2 things I need to do in my 2 or 3 days in Singapore. It could be, a place to visit. It could be like this hole in the wall restaurant that has the most amazing food you've ever had in your life. What should I do in my 2 or 3 days there if I only can do like 2 or 3 things maybe?
Well, I think the first thing that you want to do is visit Marina Bay Sands. I know it's like a very
That's where
prominent
the
place,
Amazon conference is gonna be, by the way, guys. Marina Bay Sands is gonna be where the Amazon conference is. Perfect.
right?
So I got one right off the bat. I love it.
And the second is really about food, right? Singapore is all about food. We're very proud of our food heritage. So there's a concept known as hawker centers, basically huge food courts, open air food courts with no air conditioning, where a lot of stores selling pretty affordable Singapore local food, right? You should go to any of these hawker centers. Don't go to the ones right smack in town like Lau Pa Sat and all that. Go to the ones in the heartlands, places like Old Airport Road, East Coast Park, or even Bukit Merah. So go to the one in the Heartlands. You will definitely have a time of your life.
All right, sounds complicated, so I'm gonna have you maybe pick me up and take me there so I don't get lost where I'm going.
Yeah,
All
sure,
right, now
anytime.
if anybody who's listening to this, maybe from the area, Singapore, Malaysia, that they want to reach out to you to see what kind of services you offer, how can they find you out there? How can they contact you, or is there a website, or how can they reach you?
Okay, you can drop me an email at jordan@amzfamily.com. That will be JORDAN at amzfamily.com.
All right, perfect, Jordan. I'll be seeing you in a couple weeks, and for the rest of you guys, stay tuned because I'll have info on that conference and how to sign up for that conference that I'll be attending, and then Hopefully Jordan will arrange like a cool Helium 10 meetup. All right, we'll see you in a little bit, Jordan. All right, guys. So our next guest we have in this special episode is going to be no stranger to the show. He's been on the show a few times on his own with other people, but I wanted to bring him on this one because part of my trip that I'm telling you guys I'm doing, I'm not just going to speak in Singapore, but I'm actually going to be speaking in Vietnam at an Amazon event. I don't have full details on that yet, but it's going to be October 31st. Those of you living in Vietnam and selling on Amazon, check out the Facebook group. I'll have like a post there on how to attend the event, or just check with Amazon and you'll probably see this event. But it's on October 31st. But I remembered that the last time we talked, Ryan, you actually had switched some of your manufacturing from China to Vietnam, and so that's what I kinda, like, wanted to talk to you about because I think, um, that might be intriguing to some, so I think people, always think of China for manufacturing, and if they would think of number 2, maybe they would think of India, maybe if they're in textiles, they think of Pakistan, but, usually Vietnam is not one of the, like, top 3 places people think of of sourcing from. So, first of all, what triggered you to even look to that country for sourcing? Were you having issues in China, or did a friend recommend you, or what happened there?
Yeah, honestly, it really came down to the increased China tariffs. I was paying an additional 25% on top of my normal rate,
Hmm.
and that got really expensive. So that gave me the incentive to look elsewhere.
Okay, that's that's a pretty valid, incentive there, especially when it's a 25%, increase on that. And how? What was your first step? Did you have a sourcing agent? Did you just go to Alibaba? What did you do?
Yes, so I did a Google search for a sourcing agent, and I found an American expat that has been living in Vietnam for about 15 years. He specializes in the textile industry, which was one of my products. So I reached out to him, and he works with a sourcing agency. I think he's a co-founder of the agency, and then they gave me a list of a couple of factories to interview or look at, and then I kind of went from there.
Now, me personally, I use sourcing agent, for China, as well. I think sourcing agent is kind of cool, and it sounds like you had good luck there, but I don't recommend necessarily guys going out there and Googling or just finding a random person because, sometimes it's hit or miss. It worked out well for Ryan, but then you might just be connected to somebody who doesn't work well. It's usually best to do it by recommendations or somebody you know. But one thing I do with my sourcing agent sometimes, even though I trust her and everything, but if something seems weird or a price or I just want to have a range, I'll still like go to like 1688.com, or I'll go to Alibaba and pull up some prices and compare. Is that something you did at all, or you're just like, hey, sourcing agent, take the wheel. I trust you 100% with getting the best price.
Yeah, so actually, there's another component to that. Once I got the pricing, I realized there was a couple factories on the list that had a discount of about 30% below my China manufacturing costs. So initially, I was excited, thinking I'm going to make so much extra profit. But then I realized that, hey, wait a minute, there might be something going on here. So it just so happened that I have a friend from middle school that he's been living in China as a sourcing agent since 2013. So I asked him to go take a flight to Vietnam and visit these factories in person. And, he did find some major issues with the cheapest ones on the list. He did end up kind of sourcing his own factories while he was down there. So that really did save me. Is you have to have someone, whether it's yourself or someone you really trust, go out there in person to actually audit the factory. And you can also hire an inspection company too. They do these factory audits all the time to make sure that it's a legitimate place and clean, and they have all the equipment, the
What
labor,
was like
everything.
the issue?
I think he told me that one of the places just does not look like a factory at all. It's just like a dirt floor and doesn't really have the equipment. It was just
Uh-huh.
basically a facade. And I think that was the complaint for two of the two cheapest.
And did you tell the
Um,
sourcing agent then, like, "Yo, what's the deal?" Like, do you even realize what kind of, company you're suggesting to me, or what happened there?
yeah, I don't think I really followed up with those guys because it was more of like an introduction. The sourcing agency was just
Okay, okay,
making an intro. They gave me the contact information and everything, and I went from there. So it was just really cheap, like $100 per factory or something like that.
okay, Okay, interesting. All right. So now you had a friend go visit the factory. I mean, obviously, if you could have, maybe you would have yourself. I know we can't do that for China now, but Vietnam is an open country. It takes like 3 days to get a visa. I just went through that process myself, but I like that tip about visiting it. So then, you had your friend, vet this out. What was the next steps in your Vietnam sourcing journey?
Yeah, so actually, one of the things that the original sourcing agent recommended is to get a tech pack or a technical specification file created for your product. It's a file that lists every single component that makes up your product with like the sizing and every single thing that you can think of, like basically a recipe, step by step, of everything that your product is made of, so that it's easy to translate for the factory to understand what components are needed for your product. And it also shows the factory in Vietnam that you understand your product and you know like every single component that goes into it, because I was warned that there are some factories out there in Vietnam that they know the reason why people want to go into Vietnam is to
Mhm.
avoid the China tariff. And they
Yep.
also are very familiar with what prices are in China. So you'll kind of get taken advantage of a little bit if you're not acting like you're a big player. And so
Mm.
one of the ways to do that is to have your technical specification files created for each of your products you sell. Um, so I did that, and I also sent a physical sample to the factories. They recreated their own sample. We got a quote, we agreed upon the terms, and then we just went into production.
Is are terms and things very similar? Like, standard, I think for most, depending on how long you've been with a company, it's like, all right, let's put 30% down and then, there are other 70% upon completion before shipment and things like that. Is that pretty much standard over there as well, or is there any differences?
Yeah, that is pretty standard. I think I negotiated the same terms that I had with China factory, where it was like 10% deposit, 60% right like 1 week before it lands in the USA, and then the remaining 30% 30 days after it has arrived in the USA. And Vietnam gave me those terms.
And you using a local inspection, like how did you find an inspection company to check on the product before it ships?
So I actually used my friend. He ended up liking Vietnam so much that he moved there, and now he's a sourcing agent in Vietnam for the last couple of
This is
years.
the middle school friend of
It
yours.
is, yeah, yeah. He really enjoyed Vietnam, so he's now a Vietnamese sourcing agent. So I relied on him, but I know that there's inspection companies all over the world. There's hundreds of them, so I'm sure that that part is not difficult to find, um, and they've usually been pretty reasonably priced. So I don't think that's a hurdle at all.
How about the shipping process? Is it pretty much standard? Like, hey, it was able to be loaded on a container right away, and the shipping total transit time is about the same as when you were sourcing from China, or are there any differences there?
Yeah, it was pretty much the same as China. Actually, during the COVID spike of container rates, I really didn't see much. Like, I think the most I ever paid was 18,000 for a 40-foot container, and I know other people were paying 25 or 30 or $40,000. So I don't know if it was just the route from Vietnam or I don't know what happened there, but everything else works pretty much the same. I'm even using my same exact freight forwarder that I use for China. They have
Okay.
their own agents in Vietnam, so everything was the same. Now, in general, there is a lot less infrastructure in Vietnam, so that's one thing to look out, like the ports, the roads, the highways, the trucking. Like I've heard that it can be a little more difficult, but I personally didn't experience any of those challenges myself.
Okay. Um, Now this was a product you were already sourcing and selling. So I'm assuming there was kind of commingling of inventory at one point or another, but did you ever get any issues where a customer might have complained about you, like, hey, looks a little bit different, or was like you're like maybe none of your customers even ever noticed that there was a manufacturer change because it was kind of seamless?
Yeah, so I actually did this on two different brands. So the first brand was successful. There was really no issues, no difference between China and Vietnam. The second brand, I did have one product in particular where they didn't use a strong enough nail. They kind of used more like a staple to attach these two pieces of wood or bamboo together. So that did
This
actually
must
cause
not be the
issues.
textile product.
And it It is not. It's the second brand
Okay,
that
I was
I
about to
did
say,
go
like,
to Vietnam.
what kind of clothing are you putting nails into? I'm not sure this is a great
Right.
clothing brand idea here. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. All right, go ahead,
Yeah,
continue.
so on that second brand, that product was they just used some cheap materials to attach the products, which everything looks fine, and I guess it's on me. I did not actually like do a drop test or try to damage the product and see how it held up. Um, but that's something we noticed after it was sending to customers. We were getting like 20% of the products were arriving damaged to the customers, and
Oh
once it's
wow.
taken apart, you see what was holding it together, and you're like, the customer was kind of upset. So you do need to kind of watch out for that stuff. Make sure you do the standard, like a drop test and other things that you would normally do. I guess I
Okay.
just forgot about that part.
Let's say that one day, these tariffs are no longer. Like, are you going to take your manufacturing back to China? Are you going to take your new products to China, or are you like permanently like, hey, X% of my stuff I want to make in Vietnam? What's your plan there?
Yeah, I'm not married to Vietnam right now because this second brand, because of those issues, they also have like capacity issues at the factory, so things were delayed. So that is a common theme with Vietnam. So I haven't gotten. We're in the process of finding another factory to work with, but if the tariffs were to go back to zero, I might just stay with China because another thing is that a lot of your components have to come from China. So you might have longer lead time in Vietnam because they have to source the components in China,
Mm,
then export them to Vietnam, receive them before they can even start production. So, I mean, a workaround for that is maybe there's an opportunity for you to buy bulk your components from China and then store the extra in Vietnam because that's super, super cheap. I think the factory can even store it for you in a lot of cases.
interesting.
And that way, when you do want to do a production run, you already have the raw materials ready to go. And you could probably shorten your overall lead time. So, with all that said, I'm not super married to Vietnam, but the 25% is a major incentive currently.
Okay. Now, you obviously, we learned on other podcasts, speak Chinese, can just talk directly to, Chinese factories and stuff. I'm assuming you cannot speak Vietnamese. And your middle school friend was, I'm assuming can't, at least at the time, speak Vietnamese. How's communication with factories over there? Like, is the language barrier the same as if you're just randomly, like me? I can't speak Chinese, like, so I have somewhat of a language barrier. But a lot of people, most factories over there, almost every factory in China that I know of, has at least somebody who can speak decent English. Is that similar to Vietnam?
So it's actually worse in Vietnam. Like in China, I've always communicated in English with every correspondence in every factory I worked with. But in Vietnam, I find that it's actually more rare for people on their staff to speak English.
Hmm,
So I think that's where a sourcing agent kind of helps because they're local, they live there. My friend, he actually hired someone that actually, ironically, worked for that sourcing agent that I started with, and that person is really the translator and goes along with my friend to the factory to make the translation. Um,
okay.
so yeah, I think it is a little more of a hurdle. Also, like email communications, it was a lot longer to get a response than from China. So that is definitely a hurdle.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. All right, well, there you have it, guys. I know people sometimes are looking for alternatives to China. Be it because of the taxes or be it because COVID situations or whatever. But if you haven't considered it, maybe try and start looking into Vietnam for sourcing. All right, well, Ryan, thank you for giving us your insights on sourcing in Vietnam, and maybe we'll see you in Vietnam soon. I missed you at Sound Scale because you were on vacation, but maybe we'll link up over there. All right, so our next guest we have here coming to us from Singapore is Jeremy. Jeremy, how's it going?
Great, man. It's great to be on.
All right, so I know it's a big difference, so time difference to come on here. So I appreciate you coming up at near midnight here. So before we get started, I want to make sure people can come out to where we are going to be all meeting. You're going to be going to that Singapore conference, right? That's coming up.
Yes,
Okay,
I
so
hope
guys,
you did.
I have both links now. h10.me/sing, SING. That's the link for the Singapore conference where I'll be speaking at. And then, for those who are in Vietnam, uh, a couple days later, I think it's on the 31st of October. I'll be speaking at an Amazon event in Vietnam, and that link to get more information to register there is h10.me/Vietnam. No spaces in there. So just make sure to sign up to one of those events. But real quick, let's just get your quick story about how how you got into e-commerce.
Okay, it has been a roller coaster ride for us in the beginning. We saw some friends that's doing well, so we wanted a little bit more scalable because back then we started actually before COVID. We
Mhm.
see a gap in aromatic experience with because it was started when we saw a gap in that area whereby a lot of the aromatic experience is actually in hotel areas or even in shopping centers or even in the airport. So we wanted to bring this experience back to more household and make it more accessible. And that's how we actually chosen the e-commerce route for this because e-commerce is really a growing industry, so it's a trend. So we see nowadays people are actually knows about online and are shopping online. So that's how we started. But of course, during the COVID, it actually gave us a great boost. But even there's no COVID, e-commerce is actually a growing industry. So we felt that it isn't that difficult to explore and learn about digital marketing. Hence, we just dove into it.
What do you
Yeah.
mean by aromatic experience?
Aromatic experience, we are dealing with home fragrance. So fragrance product like essential oils or even like
Okay.
weed diffusers, candles, etc. That's what we are actually dealing with.
Okay, and then you're being based in Singapore, what was the first marketplace though that you opened? Was it Amazon USA or was it Amazon Singapore or where did you start selling?
We started with Amazon Singapore,
Okay.
but unfortunately, Amazon Singapore wasn't the top five e-commerce. Amazon actually basically it's better in the US. They are of course number one in US.
Mhm.
So we decided to actually, given the US market is pretty bigger, much bigger than Singapore. So we decided to actually venture in the US eventually.
So how many marketplaces are you selling in now? Are you still selling in Singapore? And then there's obviously Amazon USA. Any other Amazon or other marketplaces?
Amazon Canada,
Mhm.
Mexico. It's actually we do the cross border as well as
Okay.
Amazon UK.
And then so as being a foreign based company, are you having to use 3PL in America to store your product, or are you shipping everything directly to Amazon?
Initially, we ship everything to Amazon, but after which we after the, there's a supply chain issue after COVID issue, so we started to actually use 3PL. Now we had a 3PL that is actually doing for our warehouse in both Canada and US. We have another one that is actually doing for us in UK. So yes, we use 3PL for all three countries.
Excellent, excellent. Now, the year is not over, but do you have any projection on what you're going to end your sales with this year?
We are on track. In fact, the happy news is we are on track to our first seven figure. Okay, for our uh, brand.
Hmm.
So right now we hope to actually cross 1.5 million
Okay.
for this year.
All right. Now, not anybody can just, reach that number, or you can't just be lucky completely and always, reach that number. So
Yeah.
what are some of the, what are some of the unique strategies you think that you're doing that has helped you reach there? Not just like, oh, I'm keeping my A cost low, or hey, I'm giving good customer service, or, like just the basic things, but like what's something that you think you're doing that's, maybe at least, 80-90% of sellers, maybe they're not doing as well as you, that has allowed you to have that kind of success?
I think for us, we a lot of people probably make the wrong decision to fall in love with the product. Because in what we do in our process, we look at what the demand that is actually already on Amazon. So we followed actually. I think it's not stranger to you guys. For we are like in the seller system support group as well. So basically we look at demand that's actually on Amazon, and Brandon's mantra is actually we cannot create demands on Amazon. So since we can't create it, we work within it. So we look at actually a lot of like the top sellers in our niche, how they are getting their sales. Once we have an idea on how the best sellers are getting their sales, we kind of actually have we do a little bit of data mining for our site. Like we put a little bit of formulas to it and build relevant keyword, what we call it the master keyword list. Because there's a lot of relevant keywords that there's a lot of opportunity which our competitors are not driving at it. So the things we want to avoid is people that does not have search in it. So we found that for our niche, we had a lot of discovery keywords. So we try to rank on them and help to create a visibility. And there, from there, we see ourselves easily on page one is because we cast our net wide enough. I think the key thing here is relevance. The relevancy has to be there. That's how we understand a little bit on the Amazon algorithm. So that's how I think we focus a lot on where we are ranking at the keywords as well. Do we have we cast the net wide enough to touch base with more keywords? So that is basically the generic thing that we actually do as a whole. It's a very important process for us.
So did you stop selling in Amazon Singapore, or do you still have that going?
We still have that of ongoing, but it's I would say it's not really our focus because they are actually still growing in Singapore.
Okay.
But our main goal, in fact, we are doing really well in US and Canada, so that will be our flagship stores.
So this, but then what do you do? Like, how do you get inventory into Singapore? Because obviously most of your inventory is going to USA. So do you just like, divert some of it when you make new batches and send to the warehouses in Singapore?
Oh, okay. Because we do actually do wholesale in Singapore as well.
Okay.
So there's certain batch of goods actually coming from our factories to Singapore. And the store here, we sell to retails, brick and mortar stores here in Singapore, as well as we have other e-commerce website or platforms that we are selling as well. They are like Shopee, Lazada.
I talked to somebody else on this episode about some of those other websites. I look forward to meeting you in person, talking more about the Singapore market, and then some of your wins and losses and selling in America. Congratulations on your success, and we'll be seeing you soon.